Okay, you are listening to Hall Monitor on WPPM 106.5 in Philadelphia, Comcast Channel 66, and streaming live at phillycam.org. You can find us on Twitter at Hall Monitor WPPM, on our website www.hallmonitor.org, or on Facebook at PHWWPPM. Tonight on the program, we'll be joined by Adam Garber, the Executive Director of Ceasefire Pennsylvania, to discuss possible answers to Philadelphia's gun violence epidemic. And former Deputy City Solicitor Mark Zecca will discuss with us the Atwater Kent Museum collection being transferred to Drexel University. First, however, we want to provide a quick update on the budget and assessment relief programs that have been going through City Council. So first of all, the city budget has to be passed by City Council in two separate council sessions, and it has to go through the Committee of the Whole first. The Committee of the Whole is like any other City Council committee that receives a piece of legislation, it hears it and approves and recommends it to City Council. Today was supposed to be the Committee of the Whole that was going to put forth this legislation. The budget legislation and all the assessment legislation that we've been talking about, the things like the senior citizen tax freeze, the LOOP program additions, the homestead exemption, all of those things have been pushed back until next Tuesday. So the budget and all assessment legislation will be pushed back until next Tuesday at 4 p.m. So we'll be covering it. If in fact that council session is resumed at that point and there's news to tell you, we'll tell you next Wednesday. Right now, though, the suspicion is, and well, I won't call it suspicion. We've spoken to a couple different council offices today. And, you know, basically, they're still working things out budget-wise. And in terms of trying to get the budget worked out, getting the reassessment and assessment legislation passed, they want to see what happens with the budget first, and that's going to inform how they handle the assessment legislation. So that's kind of the holdup right now. There probably isn't much more to know right now. We'll know more next week about that. Okay. So it'll also be in our newsletter. We'll tell you more about that. So with that said, the first interview we're going to play for you tonight is with Adam Garber, the Executive Director of Ceasefire Pennsylvania. Adam Garber from Ceasefire Pennsylvania, thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me, Larry.
Now, can you tell us a little bit about the organization?
Sure. Ceasefire PA is the state's only gun violence prevention advocacy group. So our mission is to ensure that everyone in the Commonwealth can live a life free from gun violence where they feel and are safe so that they can thrive. And so we do that through organizing and educating the public, partnering with community leaders and doctors and faith leaders, and advocating for the kind of solutions that we know work at the local and state and national level.
And when we talk about, well, before we talk about solutions, maybe we have to discuss causes a little bit. We have seen, I'll be 40 years old, and I remember when I was in high school, that was the first school shooting that registered with me in Colorado. And since then, we have seen what has become an epidemic of not just school shootings, but mass shootings in general. Now, they had happened previously, but it's just remarkable at the rate of which these have expanded. Do we have any kind of idea or reasons for why these things occur?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. And I was about the same age when Columbine happened. And if you look at the rate of mass shootings where 4 more people are shot, you know, it has steadily climbed and rapidly climbed in the last 20 years. There's a few contributing factors, but one was the end of the assault weapons ban. We know that often, you know, these assault weapons that are intended to kill have huge damage capacity. Are now just much more prevalent in communities and easier to get, as we saw in Uvalde and we saw in, you know, Buffalo. The South Street shooting's a little different, and I think is another piece of it, which is just the rapid increase in the availability and number of people carrying firearms. Look, the evidence is pretty clear on this. I'm not going to say no one should have a firearm. I'm not going to say, like, look, people go hunting, so you'll carry some for safety, I guess. I mean, the evidence is clear they make you less safe, but the fact that we have more guns than people in this country almost perfectly tracks with the rise in all forms of gun violence. And so, those pieces are really driving this. And then other things like extended capacity magazines, like we saw on South Street. So the ability to just wreak havoc very quickly has grown.
And I'd like to bring in Denise Clay Murray here on Philadelphia Hall Monitor.
Hi, thank you for joining us. We really appreciate it. I guess my first question for you is, as someone who has been advocating for there to be fewer guns on the street and for there to be less access, when you look at what's going on now, particularly the fact that the incident that happened on Saturday night was between two legal gun owners who had permits to carry.
Yeah.
What do you think about all this? And are we actually going to finally get somewhere when it comes to common sense gun legislation?
Yeah, it's a good question, and something that can be frustrating when you're working on this. Look, I think that the South Street shooting reveals what we know all along, which is guns make fistfights and simple altercations more deadly. And sometimes, and in this case, unfortunately, bystanders also get caught in that. I think about some particular stories. I think about years ago, a fight that broke, a father who asked two people cursing on SEPTA to stop because there were kids around, and they stepped off and shot him. I think about a fist fight outside Pat's, I think it was, or Gino's, I can't ever remember which, a year ago now, at like midnight over their spot in line that ended in a deadly situation. When we mix these firearms into anger and altercations that would be bloody but not deadly, they become deadly. In terms of how we get ahead of that on the life-saving laws, well, it is tough because the city's hands are tied in many ways right now. And it feels like there's no movement in places like Harrisburg and DC often. What I would say is that there's never, at least in the 2 years I've been in this role, and from what I've talked to and many other people, quite been this level of energy. And I think we already picked up another Republican on a few of our bills. And I think now is the time to be saying, this doesn't have to be anti-gun, I guess, but it does have to be about keeping our community safe, that we shouldn't live like this, and that there are safe policies to stop illegal firearm trafficking and prevent suicides. And so that's really what we're pushing for right now.
Now, you say the city's hands are tied. Can you kind of elaborate a little bit on that? I mean, I have an understanding of it, but can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Of course. Unfortunately, in addition to refusing to act on this issue in Harrisburg, the General Assembly has preempted local law for the most part. So what they said is local officials cannot enact ordinances related to the sale, ownership, transfer, or possession of firearms, which covers a pretty wide range. We are in court right now. So two pieces about this. One is what it leaves for the city is funding effective violence reduction programs, and we can talk about that. And law enforcement, which has some opportunities, but is also sometimes limited, as we saw, because there were police right like moments away from the shooting on South Street. We're in court right now with multiple cases arguing that not only is that a violation of our constitutional right to life and liberty, but that preemption is not uniform, that things like reporting of stolen weapons should be considered. And the state Supreme Court is considering that question right now. But that is the problem the city officials face.
Now, most people don't know that in Pennsylvania, you don't have to report a lost or stolen gun. And because of that, if someone can come in your house, they can steal your gun, they commit a crime with it, but that gun is still registered to you. So the police end up at your door. In terms of that, I guess, why don't people know that that's not something we have to do here?
Well, I think that, first, I think that some responsible gun owners report their weapons missing. I mean, I'm always kind of shocked by it because most firearms are not cheap. So if I lose something, or when my house is broken into, right, I call the police. I think that some people just don't know because there's no education. You can literally go in and 5 minutes later, 10 minutes later, walk out with a firearm. There's no licensing test, discussion of laws, discussion of policies. It's not like driving. So part of it is we lack that education piece. The other piece of it is that some people do know, but they use it as a loophole around straw purchasing laws. So it's illegal for me to buy a gun for someone else. But if the police come knocking on my door and I say, oh, I lost that weapon, it is harder for law enforcement to prove that I actually knew what I was doing. And so one of the things we've seen is in states that have enacted a requirement, what it mostly does, it cuts off illegal firearm trafficking, where people are using this as a get out of jail free card. And that's why we really need it. And there was a study that was looked at recently and found that a lot of the violence in Philadelphia is done with stolen weapons or claimed to be stolen weapons.
Now, you mentioned straw purchasers. I thought that you couldn't buy a gun for someone if that person was a felon and wasn't allowed to have a gun. You can't buy a gun for, like, if I wanted to buy my husband a gun for a birthday gift, which I will not be doing, but if I wanted to do that, I couldn't do that legally?
So familial transfers, as they're known, like the case of your husband, are a little different, generally speaking, and allowed. But let's say you wanted to buy a gun for a friend as a birthday gift, to simplify the question. In most cases, they would have to go get their own background check for them to have that weapon transferred to them. And you would do that through a licensed dealership. So that's the rub here, that the straw purchase process is basically a route around, the normal checks we have in place. The one exception to that is long guns. So you can privately sell a long gun, which includes an assault weapon, without getting a background check. And that means that you can do that transfer of a long gun privately without any requirements. So that's what we're really talking about often. It's even clearer when the person is a prohibited purchaser. But if you were to do it without going through that transfer process, that would also be illegal, and that would be a straw purchase or straw sale.
Okay, now we talk a lot about AR-15s and other assault rifles because when people use them, they're taking out multiple people. Is that really the problem here in Philadelphia, or is it like more smaller guns that you can like stick in the waistband of your pants and pull out?
Most homicides are, in general, not just in Philadelphia, most homicides are with handguns. So not any form of long gun, which is based on the barrel length, including assault weapons. So we pay attention to these massacres on places like Uvalde and Buffalo. I think what we do in general, and even on the handgun side, is we're living in a slow-moving massacre, and we pay the most attention when something even like South Street happens. But it's notable that this past weekend, by the time the shooting happened on South Street, the same number or more people had already been shot in the city of Philadelphia. So we had the equivalent level of violence in multiple places over a time period. Most of that was done with handguns. About 80 to 90% of homicides and shootings are conducted with handguns.
Well, now that you say that, why is it that the South Street shooting is getting so much attention at a time when you're right, we've already had more people than that killed all over the place?
I think honestly, if we want to be psychological about it, like, I think humans are just wired in some ways for certain things to be so notable. So I think the South Street thing is one. Everyone knows South Street. You go have fun, you go hang out on it, right? There you go party. And so there's this ideal of like we were out hanging out and then something turned really violent. So I think that's part of it. And I think the second is it is really easy to see the carnage when you have 3 dead and 11 other people shot versus how much can the news, national and local, cover the one-off pieces. But I think it's a problem for us. And I think it's something that we in the news media and the public have to be better at, which is how do we tell the story that we are living in this slow-moving massacre, pinpointed by moments of destruction that's even worse, not that we are surrounded by islands of destruction. And I think we have to be better about talking about that and telling those stories in general to understand the true toll of this crisis.
Okay. Now I'm going to switch to Larry McGlynn, my co-host here on Hall Monitor. Larry?
Thank you, Denise. And what are some things that have worked in other areas to help reduce gun violence that maybe haven't been tried here or maybe haven't been tried fully?
So I think one big piece that the city can do is funding and investing in community violence intervention programs. And these really range. Generally, they fall into, they meet 3 criteria. So first is, are you engaging the people most at risk for being involved with violence? So people with previous histories, people from certain communities or demographics. We can look and say, for a set of reasons, you are at high risk of being a perpetrator or a victim. And there's a very circularity between those 2 places of gun violence. Second is, are we helping them get access to the resources that will address those root causes? So economic resources like affordable housing, workforce development, and economic opportunities, the pieces of why a lot of this is committed. And the third is, are we helping them heal from often a lifetime of trauma? Because we know that hurt people hurt people. So one study found that children who had lived through violent episodes were twice as likely to lash out as people who had not. And the reason is that trauma you experience creates a fight or flight adrenaline response. And so you get ready to fight often more and have that shorter, for lack of a better word, fuse. And so programs that deal with those 3 things can really go a long way if, one, they have significant resources and the city started to invest in those programs. And 2, they're strategically targeted towards communities. And I think that's part of the challenge we're having right now, is we're starting to get to resource parity, but the effectiveness of coordination and targeting and strategy of helping facilitate the process against a whole network of organizations doing this work has really been lacking in Philadelphia.
And we've seen a little bit of this within the last couple of years with the city putting out grants for local organizations, things like that, but not at the scale that is probably needed. Now, when we look at the Commonwealth's preemption ability, doctrine, whatever you want to call it, what are sensible actions that can be taken here in Philadelphia, whether it be by decree of the mayor, city council, district attorney, whomever, that could be beneficial to helping stem this tide a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it is a challenging question because of preemption. So there are a few things going on right now. One is the lost and stolen case. And I think having the ability we're trying to argue in court that lost and stolen reporting is not preempted. And if we win that and start to carve that out, that gives a pass forward. There's a separate case to address ghost guns, and there's going to be a federal rule on ghost guns, which are these untraceable, make them at home in 30 minutes or an hour or 2 weapons that you can order online without a background check. That will help. I think that, to be honest, the only other place for the city to go outside of urging action and the funding and violence intervention programs is going to be looking at the source of the crime guns. So looking at the source of the gun stores that are most likely to supply these guns. How do you go after gun houses, these kind of pop-up black illegal markets that happen? And how do you really address why people are often able to get around our existing laws? Is probably right now the only other place that the city can look at due to preemption.
And how much does poverty factor into this? And let's not leave it at poverty, but let's talk about the pandemic and all the issues that has brought into the equation over the last 2 years. How do all those things fit together to sort of feed this violence epidemic we've been seeing?
So Poverty is a huge component. There was some work done by the Philadelphia Inquirer a while back and found that, the the zip codes of, in the areas of highest poverty rates, matched almost perfectly with the rates of highest levels of gun violence. So we know both, like, correlation and otherwise, and through studies, that there's a real big connection. I will say one thing about it. We need to transform and address the economic disparities that have been created through structural racism and inequities over the years. But that is a long-term effort. And so one of the things we're really urging right now is, when we think about how we're addressing violence, there are some programs that, because they highly target themselves, they deal with the root causes and they help heal, could reduce gun violence in the next 1 to 3 years. And based on where we are as a city, we need to focus on those things that will really deliver, while we do that larger transformative work that often takes, quite a while, unfortunately. In terms of the pandemic, we've seen violence obviously skyrocket over the last 2 years. It's generally had been attributed to two pieces. One, gun sales skyrocketed, so there's just more firearms out there, and a lot more first-time gun owners. And two is that everyone's fuse is a little shorter. I mean, I will say my fuse is a little shorter during the pandemic. We're stressed, we're emotional, we're scared. And I think that we know that those things are recipes for some of the damage. And so I think those two things during the pandemic. What is really scary, though, I will say, Larry, is that maybe does this become the new normal of 1,700, 1,800 people getting killed every year in Pennsylvania, 500, 600 in Philadelphia? We can't afford to allow that to happen. And so we got to get this back under some level of control and then push it even lower.
How can people get involved in the effort to help reduce gun violence?
So, I mean, the biggest thing I will say, and I'm biased obviously, is join Ceasefire PA. I mean, I think that, if you have these life experiences of being involved with violence, there are many credible organizations that are looking for outreach workers, and having that credible experience of being involved in these communities can be really critical to the kind of violence intervention programs. But ultimately, we're going to need more financial resources targeted appropriately, and we're going to need to change the gun safety laws in the state. It's the only way we're going to deal with this problem long term. And so Ceasefire PA is really leading that effort. And right now, in fact, the Pennsylvania Senate is preparing to try and force a vote next week on a suite of gun safety bills. And we are pushing everyone to call, Senator Corman and Senator Ward, who are the Senate president and the majority leader, and demand them to allow that vote to move forward. Because here's the thing, it's not even that we haven't had a vote, we haven't even discussed the issue on the floor of the Senate or House in the last 4 or 5 years. That is like a catastrophe for an issue that is so important to voters in Pennsylvania across the whole state.
How can people contact Ceasefire?
They can go to ceasefirepa.org and sign up for our email list, and one of our organizers will get in touch. They can also email me at adam.ceasefirepa.org, and our organizers are ready to talk to you and help you. We've got dozens of events coming up. It has been a busy few weeks, and now's the time to get involved, because in the next few weeks, we might be able to get significant more funding for violence reduction programs.
Adam Garber of Ceasefire PA, thank you so much for being with us.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Larry and Denise. It was really great to talk to y'all.
Okay, you are listening to Hall Monitor on WPPM 106.5 in Philadelphia, Comcast Channel 66, and streaming live at phillycam.org. You can find us on Twitter at Hall Monitor WPPM, or on our website, www.hallmonitor.org, or on Facebook at PHWWPPM. We'd like to thank Adam Garber of Ceasefire Pennsylvania for being with us tonight. And now we would like to play for you our interview with Mark Zecca about the movement of the Atwater Kent Museum from its current location to being transferred to Drexel University. And there are many, many layers to this story that I think are pretty interesting, that go beyond the idea of just, a museum being kind of put into private hands, which is distressing enough. But Mark lays out a very interesting kind of framework for why this could be an even bigger problem than that. So here is our interview with Mark Zecca. Okay, Mr. Zecca, thank you so much for being with us.
Oh, it's good to be here, Larry.
So first of all, can you tell us what the Atwater Kent Museum is?
Yes, the Atwater Kent Museum, otherwise known as the Philadelphia History Museum, is a building which was the old Frankel Institute building in Center City, Philadelphia, which was donated by the Atwater Kent family to the city with a condition on it that it be used as a Philadelphia History Museum. And if it wasn't used for a Philadelphia History Museum, the building would revert back to the Atwater Kent Family Foundation. So what the city has done by deciding not to have a Philadelphia History Museum there is cause the building legally to be in a status where it will revert back to the ownership of the Atwater Kent Family Foundation if they want to do so. So it directly affects the status of the building. The building itself was covered by that. The collection, however, whatever was placed in the museum does not revert. That's property of the city and controlled by the city. And that's what the city has decided it wants to give away completely to Drexel University.
So
Permanently.
So before we get into the Drexel aspect of this, tell us a little bit more about this collection. What are we talking about here?
Well, it's an absolutely priceless collection. You couldn't begin to put a dollar value on it if you wanted to auction it off. The best auction houses in the country wouldn't know how to even begin to price it yet. You're talking about things like the wampum belt from William Penn's treaty with the Indians. You're talking about George Washington's desk, the disguise hat that Abraham Lincoln wore. Things like this from American history and Philadelphia history and Pennsylvania history, down to things that people today have touched and seen, like the furniture in the Little Pete's diner from 17th Street in Center City, and the Little Pete's sign, to contemporary things like Joe Frazier's boxing gloves, all over. Just a whole wide collection of things, from priceless paintings to collections of rifles, all sorts of things. The Inquirer has, through its articles by Stephen Salisbury, has touched on different aspects of it. Over the years, since the 1930s, the city has just built up a huge collection of items that of all sorts of things. It's been called the city's attic. There's probably no neighborhood in the city that isn't touched in some way, no group of people in the city's history that isn't touched. We're a city of neighborhoods, a city of many peoples from all over the world that hasn't been touched in some way. Document collections, and so forth. It's a collection underutilized, underpotentialed, because the city has never made a commitment to developing it. And it could be the museum that tells the story the only museum that tells the story of all the peoples of Philadelphia, all the different neighborhoods of Philadelphia over the years. The story that is continuing and never ending as the city expands. It has people from all over the world, from every type of nationality, race, creed, neighborhood. Philadelphians have a deep attachment to different neighborhoods, and there are stories of the people of Philadelphia, many stories from all over the world and all over the United States. And they can all be told by a collection that was utilized properly. In order to know, it's been said, where you're going, and you need to know where you've been. And this can be that story of Philadelphia. But it's never been attempted because the decision was made that even though this was the city's property, that the city would not put any effort into it. It gave it an extremely small appropriation, somewhere in the neighborhood of maybe 100,000, 150,000 a year, something of that nature, at some point, and then that was cut off completely in the Rendell administration. I mean, most city agencies, they waste that much when they sneeze in the morning.
Uh-huh.
And that was completely cut off. So the opportunities to support this museum in partnership with other institutions of Philadelphia, like the Philadelphia Museum of Art, which the city owns the building of Philadelphia Museum of Art, the Free Library, collaboration, these institutions such as the archives, they could all be in a partnership which easily could stay in the museum with a slight amount of seed money. So what the city decided to do, though, is simply illegally, through an illegal process, totally illegal, shockingly illegal, do the equivalent of calling 1-800-GOT-JUNK and just saying, okay, we don't want to deal with this anymore. We're going to call Drexel University and say, it's yours, Drexel, basically. You can do whatever you want with it. And take it away, cart it out of here. And essentially, and doing this completely through an illegal process, which is voidable at any time. So why should anybody in Philadelphia care, with people being shot dead in the street, with kids not having education the way they should, people struggling to have, pay their bills and have the kinds of jobs that they want, all the other problems that we have in this great city? Why should people care about this? Well, there are all sorts of reasons to care, because arts and culture and history have been repeatedly given by this mayor and other mayors and by our community as a great economic engine, and also as a cultural force in our city. So the museum is a great resource to the city in its own right, okay? But it can be a huge resource which is owned by the people. This is the people's treasures, the treasures of the people, owned by the city of Philadelphia. And secondly, this just kind of resonates with me as somebody who happens to be a lawyer, although I'm not representing anyone here, and who worked for a great part of my career in government as a people's attorney, a public attorney, and specifically who worked for the city of Philadelphia government for over 20 years, in handling the special litigation of the city, the high-profile matters of the city. That what matters to me greatly, too, is the way they're doing this. They're violating the laws that protect the people of the city. So and they're doing it in such a terrible and unscrupulous way, in a terribly dishonest way, that every right, and this is something that should concern every Philadelphian, because every single right that the people of the city of Philadelphia have to any of their services, police services, all the things that concern the people that they want from their government, child welfare, mental health, they're protected by a web of laws as to what the people are supposed to get, how they're supposed to get it. And when our city government says we're not going to care what the charter says, we don't care about any of the laws that we're supposed to be governed by. We're just going to throw them in the trash. We're going to smash through them. Well, then that jeopardizes every single right that the people of the Philadelphia of the city have, and every service they want. So it's important when the city breaks the law. With this May primary, May 17th, people of Philadelphia just enacted 4 new charter changes. This is a way that the city council has gotten around the imperial king-like mayoral powers by putting things in the charter when they want them. Well, if the mayor doesn't obey the charter, and if everybody looks the other way when he doesn't, then that process means nothing. And what we're seeing is that the power of mayors, I'm not attacking just this mayor, the power of mayors is growing to the point where a mayor will blast through the charter, and then they'll create their own precedent and say, well, we did it before. Like in this case, what they're saying, they don't even have a defense to the fact that they're violating the charter. What they're doing is they're saying, well, we've given things away before without going through the process of the charter, like getting a vote of city council. And so what is happening is this museum giveaway, illegal giveaway, totally illegal, which is voidable at any time, will be a new low, a new precedent, which the city will use in the future to destroy other rights of the people of Philadelphia. This is your stuff that's being stolen. In other words, if a burglar breaks into your home and steals your stuff, and you don't catch the person and don't stop the person, that doesn't give that person a right to break in the second time and steal from you a second time. But this is the attitude that the city and its city solicitor are taking, that it's a lawless, renegade government that it is being reflected here.
So, well, what specifically is illegal about the city giving?
Well, the charter, for example, says agreements are supposed to be voted on by council, major agreements, agreements of over a year. There's no council vote here. I mean, what organization, what company gives away a massive amount of treasure owned by the group? The entire collection is being given away, and not take a vote of their board of directors. John Fry, head of Drexel, he would never do a giveaway like this without taking it to a vote of his board. It just shocks the conscience. it's something that's so illegal it should be rejected out of hand. And the charter says, look, if you're going to make an agreement of over a year, and this is a permanent agreement, you got to take it to the city council. There's been no vote whatsoever. It's nonsense. It's laughable what they're attempting to do. The charter also says that the council has to vote on things that affect real estate interests, as it does, because by not using this building anymore, this building then becomes completely recoverable by the Atwater Kent Family Foundation. So it directly destroys the city's ability to keep that structure. The charter also says that the capital budget of the city changes to the capital plan of the city, and these are capital assets of the city. Then the museum collection, priceless of the people. Their treasures are just being given away. That the council has to vote on it. For example, if the city decided tomorrow that it wanted to give away the Philadelphia Gas Works, which is a collection of assets owned by the city, it would have to get a vote of the council. So the mayors will use this precedent as the authority for them in the future to give away, without a council vote, the gas works, the water department, the airport, anything they want. And they'll say, well, we did it with the Philadelphia History Collection. We didn't vote on this giveaway there, even though the charter says that the capital budget, the whole capital plan of the city, all of its assets, its fire stations, its libraries. People screamed have to be voted on by council. The people screamed when Mayor Nutter wanted to shut some libraries, and some people went to court. I had to defend that, as a matter of fact, in court. I had to defend Mayor Nutter's authority to. He wasn't giving away the land. He was closing certain services in the library. Here, this is far worse. This is a total give away, and that's what it is. The city has been completely deceptive in not telling the court and not telling the public that that's what it is. That it is a giveaway. When you read the papers that have been entered into the court record, it's clear that this is a giveaway, and that the agreement is not worth the paper it's written on, because it's completely illegal. It's completely without authority. They didn't even go, in addition to those items that I said that the council has to vote on, it had to be approved by the city's art commission, because there's so much art in there. I used to be the counsel for the city's art commission. They didn't bother to do that. Major changes to the capital plan, and this is a capital asset, have to be brought before the city planning commission. They didn't do that. And the city's home rule charter, with the thing that the voters vote on, says that this collection will be administered by the city's agency called the museum board, and that it will no longer be administered by that. So this is something that had to be voted on by the voters. The right of every Philadelphian to vote on this is stolen from them. And if they can do this, they can do anything. Your rights are not worth the paper that they're written on. If you have an imperial mayor and everybody's afraid to stop him. And I'm not just attacking any particular mayor. There's been a growth in power. When Ed Rendell was mayor, and I served under the Rendell administration, the Street administration, the Nutter administration, he would never have dared to do this, because he would have checked with Mayor Street, with Council President Street, and Council President Street would have said, "Oh, you have to bring this to council for a vote." And Council President Street probably would have said that it had to go to the voters in a charter change. John Street, when he was mayor, he would never have tried it to do it this way. And had he tried it, there was a councilman, Jim Kenny, who was in office. He would have screamed bloody murder. He would have said, Mayor Street is trying to pull a fast one. He's doing something illegal. And Councilman Jim Kenny would, as he had done in the past, he would go out, he would recruit a big law firm. And that law firm would file a nasty suit attacking the city solicitor for saying this was legal and everything, and file it to invalidate this. And but now that Councilman Kenny became Mayor Kenny, he just does it. He orders it and doesn't bother to go to council, doesn't bother to go to get a vote of the voters on a charter change. And so people will wake up one day when the city wants to give away the airport, give away the gas works, give away the water department, give away their libraries, their fire stations, their recreation centers. Never underestimate the power of a runaway, reckless, renegade government when it decides it wants to run roughshod over the rights of the people. And that's what we're dealing with here, above and beyond the museum. And even people who support this transaction. Let's say if you're John Fry and you say you want this head of Drexel, you want this to go through, then you should want it to go through the legal way, because the way it's being done now, it's completely invalid. It's void and voidable at any time. The court that they went to never had any jurisdiction whatsoever. They lied to the court. They lied to the people of the city by saying this collection was part of a trust. The collection was never part of a trust. The laws of Pennsylvania make it clear that a trust has to be in writing. There is no trust document that covers the collection. This is just property of the city of Philadelphia, which was deposited there. They said, all we're doing is substituting a trustee, which is total horse garbage. I'm on the air. I have to be. This is so revolting and repulsive to me. Gets me upset. The total garbage. There was never any trust. This was simply property of the city of Philadelphia. The Orphans Court had no business in this matter at all. The city's petition, from the word go, was a garbage petition. The court, they deceived the court by telling the court that there's a trust here. There was no trust. The court never had jurisdiction over it. The city is not a nonprofit. Drexel may be a nonprofit, but Drexel wasn't the petitioner. The city never had jurisdiction to even deal with this case. So instead of doing the legal things, this was downright dastardly, dirty, rotten, backroom, sneaky, where they go to the court, which has no authority over this matter, instead of going to the people of Philadelphia, having them vote through their elected representatives. When there was nothing preventing the city council from voting, nothing preventing the voters from voting on this. So this is a new blow, and they start with something because they figure, oh, who cares about art and culture and history? Well, given the fact that it's one of the main generators of the main reason for the city of Philadelphia to exist here in our economy, yeah, we should all care, number one, and everybody should care. And if we let them get away with it because they think, oh, who's going to care about Philadelphia history? They won't stop there.
Yeah, there's precedent at that point.
Right. There's a runaway. So pick any issue that anybody is concerned about, any law that they feel that protects them, any service that they want from their government.
Well,
it's in danger.
Could city council put a stop to this by passing a law or an ordinance or something like that?
City council can just tell the mayor that the mayor's got to obey the law. The mayor, they don't even have to pass an ordinance. The current charter already prohibits it. The controller, the council can block it in different ways. They absolutely can say, look, you're violating the law. They can go to court. They can insist through their budgetary powers that the city obey the law. And the controller already has the authority to block any funding for this transfer because it's totally illegal. And they definitely would have standing to go to court. I think if council spoke up, I don't know if the council people have even focused on this because they've been lied to by the city solicitor, who is violating her oath of office. She has to know this is illegal unless she's stupid. And I don't believe she's stupid. She has to know this is illegal. The lawyers in the law department should realize that you can't do this without following the charter. And they took an oath to uphold the charter. And this is simply a complete outrage. And they need to obey the law. So there are different ways to stop it. People could go to court. Council could go to court. The controller could block it. And that's why it is stupid to do it this way when it's void and voidable. When you could always do it the legal way. But you see, the legal way is important, and the legal way could change the outcome because the public, if it might speak up. If it had to go to council, that means there have to be council hearings for a council ordinance. And the various representatives of the people could speak up. They might approve it, they might not, who knows? But at least if it goes to council through the lawful process, and if it's on the charter, if there were a charter change and the people of Philadelphia could actually vote on this, then they would be learning about this themselves. They would realize, hey, this is our stuff. And we get to decide whether we want to give this away. The charter says it's supposed to be administered by the city museum. And who knows what the people would say. Better ideas could surface, could bubble to the top once people realize that they have a say. That's why doing things through the back room like this, not telling the people about their rights, is so completely underhanded and dastardly that it's disgusting to me. And it should be rejected out of hand.
So where are we in the process right now? Has this transfer taken place? Is it about to take place?
Well, the city claims that now they're going to do it. The items are in storage. If they haven't actually signed the agreement yet, the court decision was about 30 days ago. If they haven't signed the agreement with Drexel yet, then it could well be signed because they're doing it all illegally and secretly. It's not above board and known exactly what they're doing. But the city takes falsely is saying that they have the right to proceed at any moment, and they may have already proceeded, and Drexel may have already taken possession. John Fry from Drexel was talking about exhibiting some of this stuff in last month, in the month of May. He was talking about it in some of the Inquirer articles by Stephen Salisbury. So they're moving forward. Now, Drexel is a victim here as well. I don't. Drexel, in some ways, is innocently going along with the city's representations that the city's doing this legally. I think people in the leadership of Drexel probably should realize that the city's doing it illegally, but because they should know that they would never do it this way if it were their own collection. They would take it to a vote of their board, but they're putting their trust in the assertions of the city of Philadelphia leadership that they're doing it legally. So Drexel's a victim here because Drexel's planning on the basis that this is legal. And they're deceiving the people deliberately, deceiving the judge deliberately. When I say they, the leadership of the city solicitor, the mayor, because they're saying, oh, we have an agreement that requires Drexel to do some things. The agreement, basically, when it comes right down to it, just says Drexel's supposed to do this in the public interest, which is a very loose thing that Drexel can bend any way it wants. And there's no enforcement. And no lawyer writing that agreement. I mean, I was a lawyer for over 20 years representing the city, and I was with the federal government in private practice, and now I'm out, in public interest attorney type of thing. No lawyer drafting that agreement who was trying to represent the city would have drafted it that way. The enforcement proceeding is so cumbersome, so full of roadblocks that it's obvious to me that the city never intends to go to court to enforce that agreement. There has to be a committee set up before there has to be time delays before the city ever can even go to court, which is weird, which is strange, and the only reason to have all of these roadblocks there to be able to enforce is because the city never has any intention of enforcing, period. And that is clear as a bell. I've seen the city write these kinds of agreements before when they never have any intention of carrying them out. This is for show, to try to tell the people, oh, we've got some agreement that forces them to do whatever they have to do in the public interest. It's not worth the paper it's written on. So Drexel basically gets everything and gets to do whatever they want with it. Drexel doesn't pay a penny for it. It's basically like calling 1-800-GOT-JUNK, and we've been paying for the storage, and basically saying we're almost paying Drexel to carve it out by paying for the storage. So, and the city's saying we don't want to deal with this. Just without telling the people, and by telling the people it's lawful. With all the shootings, and it stabs me in the heart to see people get killed on Third South, and the lack of control of guns and gun violence, and so people may say, well, how can why should we care about this? We should care about this if we care about our government, if we care about our city, if we care about any of our neighborhoods, if we care about all the peoples that have gone through.
Okay, we would like to thank Mark Zecca for being with us tonight on Hall Monitor on WPPM. We will play the entire interview on our webpage and on our Twitter page and our YouTube page. We'd also like to thank Adam Garber of Ceasefire PA for being with us. And again, that interview will also be on the YouTube page and Twitter page and what have you. Our newsletter will be out on Saturday, and we will be again joined by Denise Clay Murray and Lance Saver next week. So thank you for listening, and we'll see you next week.